I have shown that video more times than I can count, and it always lands in the same place. People lean in. The room goes still. And every time I tell them the truth, the still part isn't me. I was just a man with a phone, 61 years old, 3 days into a trip my wife and I had promised ourselves for 30 years and never once managed to take. She passed in the spring. I went anyway, because the tickets were already paid for, and because staying home alone felt worse than carrying her absence halfway around the world. So I was standing at the iron rail outside the great gates of Haraway Palace on the kind of afternoon that makes Wolf feel like a sentence handed down by a cruel judge. The forecourt stones threw the heat straight back up at you, and there was no shade anywhere, and a man could have fried an egg on the railing. There were maybe 200 of us pressed along it, all colors of hat and sunburn, every other hand holding up a phone. And beyond the rail, in his sentry box and then out of it, stood the reason we had all come. A guardsman of the RoyalGuard in the red tunic and the tall black bearskin, white gloves, brass buttons catching the sun, a rifle held at his side like it had grown there. I didn't know his name that day. Later I learned it was Marsh, Owen Marsh. But that afternoon he was just the statue that breathed, the man who could stand in that heat and not so much as shift his weight while the rest of us fanned ourselves with our maps and complained about our feet. I remember thinking that whatever they paid him, it wasn't enough, and that he probably wouldn't have taken more if you offered it. The trouble came in a cream-colored suit. He arrived the way money arrives, with people clearing out of his way before he asked them to. A big man, polished, a watch on his wrist worth more than the truck I'd left in my driveway back home. I heard a woman near me murmur his name like it meant something. Holt, Garrick Holt, the construction and shipping man whose company logo I'd seen on half the cranes between the airport and the city. The kind of name that puts itself on the sides of buildings. He had 2 people with him who laughed before he finished his sentences. He wanted a photograph. That's how it started, and harmless enough. People take photographs with the guards all day. You stand beside one, you smile, the guard stares through you at the middle distance, and that's your souvenir. Holt stood beside Marsh, threw an arm half around him without quite touching, and grinned for his friend's camera. Then he decided the photograph wasn't good enough. "Look at me," he said. "Come on, turn your head. One little turn, that's all." Marsh looked at nothing, at the air over the crowd, at whatever a man looks at when he has decided not to be there at all. I think that's what set Holt off being looked through. Some men can't stand it. They have spent their whole lives being looked at, and a man who refuses to do it feels to them like a door that won't open no matter how hard you push. Holt's grin tightened at the corners. He told the guard to smile. He told him it would only take a second. He snapped his fingers, the way you'd call a waiter who'd kept you waiting, an inch from that motionless face. "Nothing." "Do you know who I am?" Holt said. I've replayed that question more times than I'll admit. It is the question every one of those men eventually asks, and the answer that afternoon was that it did not matter in the slightest. Marsh's eyes didn't flick. His jaw didn't move. The chin strap sat exactly where it had sat. The crowd had gone quiet around us, the way a crowd does when it feels something starting to turn, and the phones came up higher all along the rail. Holt reached into his jacket and took out a billfold. "Everyone has a price," he said, loud now, playing to the railing. He peeled off a note, then another, and held them up where the cameras could see them clearly. "Here, 200 for a smile, 500 for a salute. Name it, friend. Everybody bends for the right number, that's the whole world, that's how it all works. You just haven't been offered enough yet." He folded the notes and pressed them toward the guard's chest, beside the metal ribbons, as if he were tipping a statue at a fountain. Marsh did not take them. They slipped, caught the hot breeze, and fell to the cobbles at his boots. He did not look down at them, did not look at the man holding more. The notes lay there in the sun, and the wind nudged one of them up against the toe of his polished boot, and he let it stay. I want to tell you what that looked like, because the words on the screen never quite carry it. It looked like a man being insulted in front of 200 strangers, with money thrown at his feet, and choosing, out of something I didn't yet have a word for, not to give that insult the single thing it was begging for. A reaction. He starved it. He stood there and let it die of hunger. That should have been the end of it. A man with any sense in Holt's shoes would have laughed, played the whole thing as a bit of fun, and walked off looking the bigger man for it. But the cameras were the problem. He could feel them. He could feel the story slipping out of his hands, 200 phones recording the moment the great Garrick Holt could not buy one guardsman's eyes, and it ate at him in real time. I watched it eat at him. So he stepped in front of the box. There is a changing of the watch, a small, exact ceremony where the relief arrives, and the standing sentry steps down to march his short patrol along the front of the gate and back. The crowd knows to part for it. When Marsh came down off the step and began that slow, deliberate march, his boots ringing on the stone, Holt planted himself dead in the middle of the path. "Walk around me," he said. Marsh did not walk around him. He did not stop either, not the way you'd expect a man to stop. He came on at the precise pace he had come on at since long before any of us were born, unhurried and absolute, and at the last possible moment Holt had to choose between holding his ground and being walked straight through, and he chose, with an ugly little hop backward, not to be. The crowd laughed. It was the worst thing that could have happened to a man like that. He could have survived almost anything, except being laughed at by the very people he had come to impress. I saw his face change. I had my phone up by then. I'd been filming since the billfold, some old instinct telling me this was going somewhere, and I watched, in that small bright rectangle, a powerful man stop being amused and become something meaner. He went for the rifle. It happened fast, and it's the part people slow down when they watch my video frame by frame. Holt lunged in and seized the barrel with both hands and hauled at it, the way a child grabs a toy he's been told he can't have, shouting something about teaching them all a lesson, about who really owned this country and everyone in it. And the statue moved. I have tried for a long time to describe what Marsh did, and the closest I can come is this. It was the least violent thing I have ever seen a strong man do. He did not swing the rifle. He did not strike with it or with anything. In one motion, and it was a single motion, clean as a closing door, he drew the weapon tight against his own body, turned his shoulder into the pull, and used the big man's own force against him, so that Holt stumbled forward into empty air and found, all at once, his wrist locked, his arm straightened, his whole Bhutan-paid-for body bent over and held still by a grip he could not break. No blood, no blow. Just a man who had clearly spent years learning exactly how much force a thing requires, and not 1 ounce more than that. And then his voice, the only words I heard him speak the entire afternoon, low and level, with no anger in it at all. "Let go of the rifle, sir." Holt let go of the rifle. By then the relief guard had closed in, and behind them came a square, gray-haired sergeant the others called Maddox, moving without any hurry because hurry wasn't needed. The palace police were already through the rail. They took Holt by the elbows, and he talked the whole time, told them his name, told them whose son was his lawyer, told them they had no idea what they were doing. They had a very good idea. A man had laid hands on a crown sentry and tried to wrench his weapon out of his hands in front of 200 witnesses, and there is no name large enough to make a thing like that simply go away. Marsh, the instant Holt's hands were off the rifle, had already stepped back to his position, brought the weapon up, resumed the march, as though none of it had so much as brushed him, as though a famous man being walked off the forecourt in the grip of 2 officers was only a change in the weather, and he was the roof it fell on. I lowered my phone. My own hands were shaking, and his had not trembled once. You know how the rest of it goes, because most of you saw it long before you ever met me. My video was not the only one. There were 200 of us, and by nightfall there were 200 angles, and everyone told the same story, and the story could not be bought or buried because no single person owned it. The man who said everyone has a price found out, the hardest way there is, what a thing looks like when it has no price at all. His company put out a statement. Then another, worse than the first. The cranes I'd seen on the drive-in began coming down off the buildings as the contracts went elsewhere, because it turns out the public keeps a long memory for a man who throws money at a soldier's feet and then tries to tear a rifle out of his hands. There was a court date he could not talk his way past, and charges his lawyers could not make smaller. The last I read of it, the few buildings still wearing his name were quietly having the letters taken down, one bolt at a time. I have thought a great deal about why it stayed with me, an old man on a trip he was supposed to take with someone who wasn't there. I think it is this. We are told, most of our lives, that everything bends, that every man has his number, that if you push hard enough, long enough, with enough money or noise or plain cruelty, the thing in front of you will eventually give. Holt believed that with his whole chest. He believed it right up to the second a younger man in a hot wool coat showed him it was not so, and showed him without raising his voice, without throwing a single punch, without once letting the insult pass the buttons of his tunic. I went back the next afternoon. I'm not sure what I was looking for. Marsh wasn't on the box, they rotate, I learned, and a sentry stands a long enough watch without a rich man trying to take his rifle from him. But the guard who was there stood in the very same way, eyes forward, motionless in the same brutal heat, and the same crowds leaned at the same rail with the same phones, most of them never once knowing what had happened on those stones the day before. That's the part I always end on when the room has gone quiet on me. The discipline was not a trick he switched on for the cameras. It was simply who the man was, on a day nobody filmed and a day everybody did, exactly the same either way. The strongest thing I have ever watched a person do was decide, 200 times over, not to do anything at all, and then, when it finally mattered, to do precisely enough and not a hair past it. I never did get his eyes. He looked through me the way he looked through Holt, the way he looked through every one of us at that rail. I've made my peace with that. Some men hold the line on purpose so the rest of us can stand behind it and never even know it's there. I keep the video, not for him. He doesn't need it. I keep it for myself, for the days I'm half tempted to believe the loud man with the billfold. The days the whole world feels like it's for sale to whoever shouts the highest number. I play it, and I watch a man in a red coat stand still in the heat with money lying at his feet, and I remember that the loud man was wrong. Everyone does not have a price. Some men just have a post, and they keep it.